Good morning. I'm your host, Max Zhang, founder of Human Prosperity. Today, we have Andrew Kitchner, Masters in Mind, Brain, and Behavior. He is the CEO and lead commitment researcher at New Wave Solutions. Welcome. How are you today?
I'm doing well, Max. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you here, and I'm excited to learn about what you do. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the things you do at your new company?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of people are familiar with engagement surveys. It's kind of the main tool to combat a paradoxical problem. The problem being that human capital, or just employees in general, are seen as both the largest asset for companies as well as the largest challenge. And so what we do, instead of measuring engagement at New Wave Solutions, what we do is we focus on measuring what's called organizational commitment.
Okay, that sounds pretty fancy. So, and I think for some companies, they might not even know, what is the heck is engagement, and especially what the heck is, organizational commitment. So,
Yeah,
can you kind of tell us the definition of what engagement means, and also at the same time, what is an organizational commitment?
yeah. So engagement, they're kind of a product of the fact that there are so many engagement surveys out there. The definition gets tweaked based on who you talk to. But essentially, it means your active involvement within your role within the company. So whatever your duties are, whatever task you're performing, you're engaged while doing those tasks. And the idea is similar to job satisfaction or these other metrics. The reason why companies focus on a given metric, whether it be engagement or commitment, is because it predicts desired outcomes. That's lower attrition, that's better job performance, less withdrawal, less need for oversight, etc. And so engagement is that active involvement, whereas commitment is a little bit of a deeper metric, and it's found to better predict those desired outcomes. And when somebody, if you think about somebody who's offered an alternative job opportunity while at their current job, an engaged employee won't necessarily turn down that better job offer just because they're engaged, because that loyalty to a company isn't predicated upon their engagement. It's that loyalty is instead predicated upon their commitment. And that commitment, that organizational commitment, it means that you're committed to not just your role within the company and performing your role, adequately or well. It's instead being committed to the people within the organization as well as the organization itself. And so what happens when somebody is committed to an organization, they see the organization's goals, the organization's success as their own goals and their own success. And when that happens, it kind of builds a deeper attachment to the organization. And instead of just being engaged and focused in their role within the company, they're instead focused on the broader success of the company. And so they think more holistically about the role that they play within that company, as well as how they can contribute to that success.
Okay, that's very nice. Yeah, and right now, especially right now, like with COVID-19 and things like that, it's like I think having commitment is actually much more important than just being engaged. And in some ways, I guess even engagement is at risk right now. uh,
Yeah, absolutely. Especially with remote work, there's less personal connection to the people and to the company when everybody's working from home. And obviously, that's not the case in every organization, but that's kind of the new normal, at least for now. And when you just kind of work remotely and you have less of that connection, um, engagement is more volatile and commitment becomes more important.
mm. And for your survey, like how does it actually go about measuring someone's commitment? Because that sounds
Yeah,
like hard.
yeah. So there's actually a good amount of research behind this. The scale that we're using is a scale that has over 15,000 citations. And my work in grad school, part of what it was to create what's called a short scale, which just means shortening how many questions it takes to measure commitment. And so what we do is we measure it with 13 Likert scale questions, which are questions: how strongly do you agree to strongly disagree? And so we can ask just that number of questions, and we can measure commitment with a verified scale. And what's interesting about the scale that we use for commitment and just the broader metric is it touches on three types of commitment, because when you talk to people, commitment isn't single faceted. And so what the commitment scale does that we use is it measures somebody's effective commitment, normative commitment, and continuance commitment. And I know I'm throwing a lot of terms out at you and your audience here, but essentially it's a more holistic approach to looking at commitment. It's a recognition that there's a need for employees to work, but you also need to develop some degree of obligation. And you do that by having them be involved in projects that are purposeful and meaningful to them, and being surrounded by people that they collaborate well with, and that there's a mutual degree, not just of commitment, but of understanding the purpose and the role that each other play within the organization.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's awesome. So I understand that you also have a survey for remote work as well. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so it's still focused on commitment, but what we do, our survey is pretty amendable. So what we do is the way that we measure commitment stays completely the same. It's verified, it's reliable, and that's not something that we change. What we do change is the other variables that we measure. And so what we end up doing, whatever variables we end up measuring in whatever version of our survey that we're doing, depends on what the company's needs are. And so we do have a good amount of clients who are focused on the needs of their remote workforce. And so what we do is we ask, in that case, a series of remote work questions to try and better understand what are the variables with this new remote work, which are most linked to employees' commitment. So that is going into an organization and through the survey, asking questions that are free response. So employees get to essentially, it's an opportunity for them to write down changes and improvements that they want to see in a variety of areas, whether that be remote work technology, whether that be remote work culture, remote work communication, depending on the company, or even if it's employees who are working in the office still or in a manufacturing facility, we would measure safety protocols. And by adjusting those variables, which we look at for remote work, we can tell what are the changes for this new remote work setting, that if those changes get made, it will most effectively and efficiently improve an organization's commitment.
Okay, awesome. I mean, that's also a lot of complicated stuff. So is this something that your company comes up with by working by yourself, or are you collaborating with other organizations to develop these surveys?
Yeah, so we developed the survey. To my knowledge, we're the only company in the entire world now that measures organizational commitment. Like I've said, engagement really dominates the market. Companies spend $780 million a year, last year at least. And for this year, they're projected to spend $1.5 billion on engagement surveys. And so it's definitely the dominant metric out there, but it has been that way for 30 years. And so the survey that I developed was actually developed partially during my graduate school research when I managed the well-being lab here in San Francisco. And that's kind of where it all got started. Initially, I was focused on engagement because coming into it kind of as a novice to the whole area, and coming at it from a research perspective, if all of these companies are focusing on engagement, that's where I figured the answers were. There was a reason why they were focusing on engagement. It must be the best metric. And once I started digging deeper into the research, that kind of just became a facade. It was true at one point, but that was when it was first developed, and that was back in 1990, which, funny enough, just to give you an idea of how antiquated that is, that was the same year that the World Wide Web published their first web page. So it's been a minute
Mm-hmm.
since that's taken place. And so then I started exploring a variety of other metrics and essentially compared their efficacy. And it's pretty logical when you talk to, or just intuitive, beyond just the research, kind of reinforcing it as the better metric. When you talk to employees, um, they don't just want to be engaged. And what we find is that engagement, it's important. It definitely matters, but it's an outcome of commitment. And so by fostering and focusing on commitment itself, the result is engagement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely agree that we need to have something new after so many years.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, it's great that your company is leading that effort to making sure that employees are more than just engaged, but committed and be able to be more fulfilled in their role.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm honestly quite fortunate in that this is one of the few jobs, in my opinion, and kind of positions where you don't have to be just on the employer's side or on the employee side. You can actually be an advocate for both of them and benefit both of them. And in these roles, not that we do straight up consulting, but just in a lot of roles that are in the realm of consulting, what I find is a lot of the positions, a lot of the companies, and a lot of the disciplines are really focused on being an advocate for one or the other. Whereas with us, we're fortunate enough to be able to go into an organization and kind of be a voice for the employee and an ear for the employer. And by doing that, we kind of bring the two of them closer, help them better understand each other. And that's really important to me, because when you have those two um, kind of positive incentives from the employer and the employee side, that's a really valuable opportunity to create fundamental change within the organization. And it's not us coming in and saying, here are the 12 changes that we want you to make or that we suggest you make. It's us going to the employees, and that's the source of the changes. Um, and that's a lot more effective than going in and just assuming that you know what needs to be done with the organization better than the people who are working there. And so we're really fortunate to be able to do that for our clients. But it's been really great to connect with the employees as well.
That's awesome. Yeah, definitely. I mean, the employee for me, that's like the most important component of a company. So, and we cannot overlook that. We have to focus on making sure everything is prioritized on the employee. And that's why for mine, I also have offering for employee training as well, which is to enable them to be happy and productive. For me, like as long as they're happy and productive, everything else just follows them.
Yeah, exactly. And when they're unhappy, that's when things slide downhill in so many ways. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
their desire to expend discretionary effort towards things is not going to go up if their happiness doesn't go up.
Mm-hmm.
And you're totally right that the employee is the most important. And one thing that kind of got me interested in that side of the equation was in my undergrad school. I got a degree in economics and was looking at the labor market. And what I kind of stumbled across and learned was that it wasn't always the case that the employee was the most important. In the 1800s or whatever it might be, when tasks were pretty, there was a lot of repetition, there
Mm-hmm.
wasn't a lot of complication, there
Boring.
was a need, yeah, exactly. And there was a need for maybe apprenticeship, but the degree of complication and intricacy, obviously, that existed in most jobs in 1850, versus today. Today, it's much, much higher. And so, what that changes is as the degree of intricacy increases for an employee's role, their ability to contribute to either their organization's success or lack thereof uh, increases dramatically. And so companies' success is more linked to the quality of employee and the quality of their work now than ever before. And that's a trend that's not slowing down. And so that's why you see this space growing. And you do see an incentive for the employer to better understand the employee.
100% on that. So can you tell us a little bit more about organizational commitment? Like what is the history around that and who has been doing research in that area?
Yeah. So it started kind of with a fundamental paper by Meyer and Allen, who are two psychologists, PhDs, and they kind of got that conversation kickstarted. Since then, there hasn't been nearly as much attention until recently on organizational commitment. Like I said, engagement dominated the business space. And so consequently, a lot of the funding went towards engagement on the research space. That's where the money was, that's where the interest was, that's where a lot of the forces were pushing research towards. But over the last maybe 5 years, I would say, there's been a number of organizations that have started looking into it. And bigger than that, there's been a number of legitimate research institutions. So literally everybody from Harvard to Wharton, now the Air Force the US Air Force has been doing a good amount of research on it. And really it's because the cost and frequency, maybe not right now with COVID, but just generally, the cost and frequency of turnover has been going up dramatically. On average, it turnover cost is 30% of somebody's annual salary. And so as that cost has gone up, organizations and institutions are more focused on what predicts low attrition. And organizational commitment, one of its main attributes compared to engagement, is its ability to predict lower attrition. And so that's really kickstarted a lot of the research now that we see really across, like I said, Harvard, Wharton, USC's business school, a variety of the largest business institutions and research institutions across the country.
Awesome. Yeah. It's great to see many major institutions actually backing it as well. So, and are you privileged to tell us like some of your big customers?
So we have NDAs with pretty much all of our customers.
Okay.
So
No worries.
but I can tell you, we just got done relatively recently with a top 5 architecture firm. It's top 5 in the world.
Oh, very nice.
Can't get more specific than that,
Okay.
but they're pretty cutting edge and a great group. And so generally we work with organizations. The smallest is generally around 250 employees. But we've got data now from 43 distinct industries. So it's a pretty wide swath of companies.
Awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay, so now I want to know more about Andrew. Who is Andrew Kitchner? So can you kind of take us back into your life journey in terms of from your childhood to now?
Yeah. So I was raised in California, born and raised, and so went through public school. Had a somewhat traditional upbringing, I would say. Fortunate in a lot of ways, less fortunate in others. I'm fortunate that I was able to go to good public schools. Less fortunate in some areas. My parents got divorced when I was 5. There are things that, just like anybody's life, there are roadblocks and difficult periods. But I really started being interested in business at a pretty early age. And so, when I was a little kid, me and a friend used to go house to house and paint curb addresses for people for $20. And small little kind of ventures, almost like lemonade stand ventures, growing up. And that's always kind of what interested me. And I'm not going to lie, yeah, young me, part of it was, oh, look, you can make money. I can go to the movies more often, all this stuff. But really, my parents had me working from the time I was 16. I was playing competitive golf at the time, and they had high expectations in that, in my work, in my schooling. And so it's not that success was prioritized necessarily, but more so expending an amount of effort that you could be proud of, no matter what you did. And so that was a pretty underlying theme throughout my upbringing. And then I went to undergrad at UC Santa Barbara on a golf scholarship. And while I was there, like I said, I studied economics. And economics is really, it's a great tool to increase human prosperity. It's really, really important. But what I found is that it doesn't tell the full picture. You have to assume certain commonalities amongst people to be able to build these economic models. So essentially, you have to assume that everybody, if they know what to do economically, that they will do that. And by assuming that everybody's more or less the same, which is necessary, like I said, to build these models. But what I started to notice, mainly from taking a few behavioral economics classes, is that leaves out a really big variable, which is individual differences. People are very similar in a lot of ways, and that's what allows us to build these pretty accurate models. But when you start honing in and kind of zooming in, you notice there are huge differences with people. Everything from personality traits to upbringing to priorities. People are very, very different. And that was something that I felt was missing in my education. And so that's what ended up leading me to do some research while I was studying abroad in New Zealand on the psychology and neuroscience side of things. And that really sparked my interest in this individual differences, and really more so just focusing on filling in the blank that the economics education left. And that led me to, like I said, going to graduate school, and ended up managing San Francisco's largest well-being lab. And that's something that kind of triggered, similar to you, really focusing on trying to improve humans' lives. And the average person in the U.S. will spend, I think it's 90,000 hours of their life working. And so if you can improve something, that 90,000 hours, that's a pretty darn big chunk of your life that if you can improve, it's super important. And so that's really kind of what sparked my interest before coming across the research that ultimately led to New Wave Solutions.
1000%. 1000% on that.
Yeah, yeah.
Cool. Sounds like you have a pretty nice life, nice, easy life. Can you tell us like some of the challenges? Like what was the biggest challenge you had?
Yeah. So I've had multiple challenges. Definitely it hasn't been an easy life, I would say, but I've been fortunate in a lot of ways. Everybody's on the spectrum of how fortunate they are, how easy their life is, and everything's relative. But as far as some of the challenges, one of the bigger ones was that transition during my undergraduate experience. So like I said, my degree was in economics, and I was working at an investment firm at the time. And that might sound all fancy and everything, but just to give you an idea, at the time I was working, 35 hours a week, going to school full time, playing Division I golf, and I wasn't, reaping all the rewards of all those efforts in that I was, at the time I was living in a tool shed in the back of a house in Santa Barbara.
Oh, wow.
And that's just how things were at the time. And so there have been challenges that have humbled me
Mm-hmm.
absolutely along the
Yeah.
way.
As
Um,
well.
yeah, but I've been pretty much all of those I've been extremely appreciative for. And so anyways, at the time, that was the plan, was to continue working at the investment firm. And I was fortunate enough after a few years to get a full-time job offer. And 2 weeks before I graduated, I turned it down. And that's when I decided to go to graduate school. And within, I think, 5 weeks of that, and that decision was made while I was in New Zealand. And so I had 5 or 6 weeks to get into graduate school without taking any graduate exams. Big transition that some people said, hey, why would you turn down this opportunity at an investment firm to,
Mm-hmm.
go spend more money on an education? And so it took a good amount of conviction to decide that this was the better route for me. Um, and so that was a big challenge, just mentally, as far as shifting my perspective and not ignoring the people who were saying don't do it, but actually listening to it, considering the pros and cons of it, giving a good faith conversation around it. And since then, I had multiple challenges coming into graduate school. It's a very coding heavy program because it's a pretty neuroscience focused. And so there's a lot of neural networks and just statistical coding. And I had no experience, zero. And maybe I'd watch some YouTube videos on coding or neuroscience or something like that, or a TED talk, but not much beyond that. And so I got thrown into a world where, I was surrounded by extremely successful people in this discipline who had minimum 4, 5, 6 years of experience. And so coming into that was an adjustment. But I think that's super important to put yourself in those uncomfortable positions, because if you don't, then you don't grow outside of where you're currently at. And so that was a difficulty in the beginning. Wasn't like frightening, but at times, to be honest, it was overwhelming. But it was extremely beneficial. And from there, just starting the company, I mean, that was an extreme challenge. And so there are better times to start a company other than a pandemic depression. It wouldn't be my ideal scenario. And so I think a lot of the previous challenges and obstacles and apprehensions that I'd overcome previously has helped me during this time. And yeah, where things are looking up, we're doing well, and looking forward to helping companies during this difficult time, but really looking forward to getting past this difficult time as well.
Awesome. Yeah, I love your mindset in terms of how you see problems as opportunities for growth. So, and yeah, that is key. I mean, a lot of people just see problems everywhere. For me, I see opportunities everywhere because every problem is simply just an opportunity, uh, depending on the perspective of how you look at it. So,
Exactly. That's one of the key things that I've continually found to be true, is almost everything is dictated by perspective. You can throw two people into the exact same scenario, facing the same exact consequence, and having different perspectives will shift how they approach the problem, how that problem weighs on them, whether they're able to combat, the negative implications of that problem. That perspective, aligning it with what's better for you, better for the problem, and better for the people around you. That's the exact perspective that you need. Like you said, if you approach the problems by seeing them as an opportunity, then you see that there is room to improve it. Whereas if you just kind of stay on the fact that it's a problem, you weigh on the negativity of that problem, you see it as a fundamental problem that's not able to be shifted or amended, then that's not many great things come from that perspective,
Yeah.
and so we're all here for a relatively short time on this earth. And so if we want to leave a lasting impact that benefits the people we're around, the people we care about, and the people that come after us, I think just as humans, we're obligated to look at problems as opportunities.
Right. And an example of that is like, looking for a job. Like right now, a lot of people are looking for a job and cannot find one. They see that as a problem. For me, it's like I see that as an opportunity for them to kind of look for different ways of creating their own job, looking for different ways of upskilling so that they can actually go into a different field. So it's an opportunity for them to learn and grow and get into a different field. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. I mean, there are no doubt problems that are legitimate problems right now for people. I mean, if
Yeah,
you're
definitely a real
a
problem.
single mom that has two kids and you got fired and you
Mm-hmm.
don't have much job training, then that message can be difficult to resonate, but it doesn't change it from being true.
Right.
And it's hard to know. I mean, it's impossible to know where you're going to be in 5 years. And so when there are big pivots in life, whether you chose them or they just kind of hit you, um, you don't know for sure whether that pivot is going to be good or bad. And so you have to get behind, um, pushing for a positive outcome and trying to elicit a positive outcome from whatever, curveball that life throws at you.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's, they will get thrown at you. You can't
Oh, yeah.
avoid them in life.
There's tons,
Um,
tons.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And the biggest ones are never the ones that you expected. And so you have to be nimble in that way. And it's definitely difficult right now, more so than usual. But you're totally right that there are opportunities, um, not just personally, but globally, by facing these challenges.
Hmm. Yeah. And I think, once we get through this, we'll come out stronger, much stronger, every single person, and also as a whole, as a human race as well.
Yeah, yeah, I think so too. And I hope so. I mean, that's the silver lining with any major global struggle in my mind. I mean, nobody looks at World War II as, oh, that was such a great time. But when you look at what humanity prevented during World War II and how humanity came together from World War II,
Hmm.
um, there's no doubt that there was a silver lining in it.
Hmm. Yep. So what's next for you and your company?
Yeah. So we're just launching a new version of our survey, which is pretty exciting. Like I said, we're focused on not just measuring commitment, but measuring a number of variables which contribute to commitment. For instance, career opportunity, career development opportunity. And so that's one of the variables that we're looking at. And so we're just getting done beta testing a this new survey, which measures those 6 predictors of commitment. Um, and we're also releasing a new version of essentially our dashboard reports as well. So instead of just kind of giving a long written report, which we've seen a lot of companies do, we try and make the data interactive and engaging. And that's really important in our mind because data is playing a bigger role in all of our lives and all of our decisions. I mean, if you're afraid of data or really getting into it, there's not going to be any avoiding it in the future. And really, it's a great tool to make better decisions. But one of the problems with this onslaught of data that we're seeing is managing it, but also displaying it in ways that stick with people. And so, even if we were to get great informative data from a survey for a company, if we can't display that data and go through that data in a way that is engaging to the company and is kind of straight to the point, then the changes that the employees want to see are going to be less likely to happen. And so we've really been focused on that and making the findings that we extract from these surveys more easily interpretable, but also create data which, when you look at it, it sparks a question of, oh, what's going on there? Let's dig deeper in that. And it's kind of by prompting those follow-up questions with our clients that we see the best results. And so that's really what we're focused on in order to elicit the best results from these surveys. And so that's really our main mission right now. And then on the side, I'm also writing some articles, one hopefully for Harvard Business Review, and really just trying to get the message out there. That engagement, like I said, it was great in 1990, but this isn't 1990, and there's a need to change. And that shift is happening. Like I said, we see it across this major research institutions and now some major organizations. And really what the focus is building that momentum and reinforcing it with legitimate research.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So I have +1 on the data-driven approach. I think right now, especially right now, every company needs to be data-driven so that they can actually understand their business deeply in terms of different areas and with different metrics. And then they can actually make sound decisions that's measurable so they can actually iterate, improve on it. If you do not have that data, if you're not able to have that visibility, whatever you do, you don't know what's going to happen. You may be making things worse. You might be make things better. But if you have a metric and you can just see how you're improving on that metric, you know where it's going. So you can continue to improve, get to where you want to. So
exactly. Yeah, I think that's a super important point, because when you're blind to that, then you're just forced to speculate. And when you run a large corporation and you're speculating, you're not just Yeah, exactly. And you're not just speculating for yourself. You're speculating for the entire company and all the employees and all of the clients. And maybe that was necessary before we had access to all of this data, but it's not necessary anymore. And for the most part, we can get data on a lot of important decisions. And so you continually see that the more effective organizational decision makers are not instinctual. They're data driven. And, you look at COVID response, that's the epitome of what should be data driven. And so there is an increasing amount of respect for data. And there are some traps in that, you can get a lot of data which can be improperly collected, improperly analyzed, and there are, trap doors along that journey. And it's important to recognize those and avoid those. But the momentum of data being the basis for decision making, again, it's one of those trends that, it's not slowing down. Nothing will slow that down.
Mm-hmm. I love what your mission, what your company is trying to do, your company's mission, and what your mission is in terms of helping people to be more committed to their work, and so that they can actually be happier and make the best use of their time versus being disengaged and not happy. So
yeah.
And for companies, for other businesses, if they actually want to start working with you in terms of making sure that the employees is more committed and at the same time ensure their long-term prosperity, how would they get started with your company?
Yeah. So they can contact me. I'm sure you'll put my contact information, below in all of your podcast display places. But they can email me, and I'll give you my email to throw below. Mm-hmm. Or they can just email our general email at contact@new-wave-solutions.com. I'm also on LinkedIn. We're on Twitter. We're on Facebook. We're on YouTube. All the major platforms. Any way you can connect with me, reach out. And what we try to do when we have conversations, especially the beginning conversations with companies, is I don't want to immediately jump into here's our product. Let us sell it to you. What we want to understand is, have you had a survey before? How has that been? What did you like? What did you not like? Do you feel that the survey provider overpromised and underdelivered on their results? Who were you working with before as far as the survey? Did your employees trust the anonymity of that survey? We really want to get a peek through the window of the company's previous survey experience, if there is any, to see what went right, what went wrong, as well as to understand what are their goals. Because we want to make sure not only that they're the right match for us, but that we can help them achieve the goals that they're trying to achieve, and that they're in a place to where if we do work with them and we do inform them with this data that's actionable, that they're in a position to where they want to make changes. If an organization just wants to do a survey for the sake of doing a survey, just because it's the commonplace thing to do, that's not really going to work for us. So we want to go into organizations and spend our time working with people who want to make improvements. And once we realize that, then we go through our product and we kind of build out a sample survey. We run through it with them. If companies want to focus, on certain regions or looking at maybe different departments within the company, we talk to them about what kind of breakdowns they want to see as far as the data goes. And it's really a team exercise, because we want to understand not just what information they want, but is it best shared in a really direct, short way? Some companies want it in PowerPoint slide deck that's less than 10. Other people want an Excel file which has every single bit of data that we got to where they can analyze it on their own. And so really understanding and getting on the same wavelength as these companies is where we start out.
Awesome. So one last question for you. So with your survey, where should business put their engagement survey?
Where should they put their engagement survey?
Yeah.
In the trash.
Okay. Good answer.
Yeah. So it's definitely better to focus on engagement than not survey employees, not talk to employees at all. But engagement is not worth the amount of money that's being spent on it. In 2020, it's estimated to be $1.5 billion that US companies are spending. What I would say for those companies is, before you spend another $1 million on engagement, consider whether this 30-year-old metric is still the right metric for today. And we're happy to have that conversation with you. We're happy to share independent research that confirms what we're saying. And just because something is the status quo, being engagement, don't assume that the status quo is the best. And that's a shift that organizations are starting to make. And the ones that are looking to kind of be on the cutting edge of maintaining and encouraging a good relationship with their employees, they're understanding that there is a need to better connect and understand what's going on with employees. And that's what we're all about.
Awesome. Thank you, Andrew, for sharing your story and also your company's story to help others prosper.
Yeah, of course. Thank you very much for having me on. It's been great, and look forward to future conversations.